Hey, Brittany, thanks for coming on the show.
hmm Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I want to frame my invite to you because we were in kind of this marketing course class together, and your work is very interesting to me. You're a psychiatrist and you work with teens, and my business is about coaching and mentoring mostly young adults. And so I just saw a lot of overlap there. We ended up having a discussion or two, and you're funny and you're interesting. And so I wanted the audience to hear your perspective on a lot of things. So thanks again for coming on. And
Sure.
maybe let's just start with who are you and where are you from and how did you get here? What's your origin story?
Right, right. We all have a story like that, don't we? I have been a licensed therapist now for about 17 years in Orange County, California, working solely with adolescents and parents. And I came to this profession through my own personal struggles and my own personal challenges, and had someone help me who made just a lifetime of a difference and just got me back on my feet again. Mhm.
Uh, if you don't mind my asking, like how old were you and kind of what was the nature of the problems and issues and how did you get through that?
I was or my early 20s when I saw him. I was going through addiction, and I had a lot of trouble managing my own feelings, figuring out what was going on for me. And My family knew something was going on, and they got me help, and that man literally changed my life.
That's great. Yeah. A lot of us have somebody like that in our lives. In this case, you were inspired then to become a therapist yourself and help other people in the exact same way that you were helped. Yeah.
Yeah, I started just taking some general classes at UCLA just on substance abuse initially. I thought I wanted to work in treatment centers, and then what I realized is more what would have helped is not the specific issue that I was struggling with, but someone catching me at the right time in life. And that time in life for me was during adolescence, where there could have been so many pivotal conversations that would have opened my mind to thinking in a different direction. Um, and meanwhile, I think there's a lot of adolescent qualities we all still, I'll speak for myself, have. And
Yeah.
so I just really just enjoy that developmental phase.
That's great. So, what have you learned? That's a hard question after 17 years. I'm sure you've learned more than what we can chat about here. But what have you learned about the process, having been on the treatment side, and then now on the other side of things?
I've learned a lot about emotion and how people, if they really don't have a very good access to their inner world and what goes on and how they work and what their triggers are in relationships, or in the workplace, or in life in general, it's really hard to navigate a life filled with a lot of vitality and a lot of opportunity if you don't have access to that. And so it takes quite a bit of time to understand the nuances and the details of that. And so I think it's so important for someone to have a life worth living to go there and to look at some of those things.
It's funny. Kids give you a lot of perspective, and I have two little girls, and like every kid, they throw tantrums. They're over it now. Mostly, they're 6, 7, and 8. But certainly, when they were younger, they would throw tantrums all the time. And I remember when they were little and they were going through these phases, that I would then see an adult, a full-grown adult, at a restaurant or at a golf course or somewhere, essentially having a meltdown like a toddler. And I had never seen an angry person in that light before. But after that, since having kids, I can't unsee it. Anytime I see someone that just totally loses emotional control, especially in anger, is typically, I think, maybe where we see it the most in public. I just see a giant child, and we're all human. We all have intense emotional experiences, and I understand what that person is. I understand why they're feeling what they're feeling, and yet the behavior to me just looks childish. So, what is it that we can maybe, if there's a tip out there for anybody, especially obviously our audience, is what's one or two things that you can kind of focus on now to catch yourself when you get in those modes and maybe exit them a little bit faster than you might otherwise would?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question and a really interesting story to illustrate the point too. I think emotion is kind of like data points we're gathering throughout our life. So those moments we fully regress are actually not necessarily a negative thing because it's more and more data as to how we work, how we tick, what sets us off. And so if you can actually become a lot more curious and open to like what's going on with me right now, that is crazy that set me off, but it didn't set my roommate off or it didn't set my partner off, but something about my makeup and my history. And then definitely I believe so much of who we are and how we are going about the world comes from those primary developmental years. So kind of sifting back through, this is not to blame family, but to better understand the limitations and the way in which they tried to care for us as best as possible might have left us with some different ways that we're feeling limited in terms of needing to grow and recognize to be more in our adult self versus in a regressed self that's and I think no matter how much awareness you have, you still will always regress into a 2-year-old. But that's
Yeah.
just, but then if you have the awareness to grow from that 2-year-old, you certainly can.
Yeah. I really like how you think about emotions being data points. I'm a science guy. I taught physics in college and or at the college level, and so I'm of a STEM person. And then in our courses, we offer STEM courses through our educational programs. And I have to think about that more. I don't know if I can comment on it live, but I really like something about that intrigues me about thinking about emotions as data points and indicators. And I 100% agree that if you can find yourself curious about the emotion, it definitely tends to deaden the intensity of it a little bit, or to mute the intensity of it a little bit. For me, probably anger is probably my emotion. All right, I don't get sad. I tend to get very happy and excited around my friends and family, and I'm very expressive. But then, especially if I'm dealing with kids, my kids who are not doing what they're supposed to, or I've had to ask them to do 1,000 things, right? My tendency is definitely to anger. And I have noticed that when I stop and pay attention to that feeling and interrogate it a little bit, then I distance myself. I'm not fully identified with the emotion now. It's something else that's inside, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm articulating that very well.
Yeah, you're articulating it really well, and I think that's a common problem so many of the parents have that we work with. I think underneath a lot of anger is fear or just sadness around like, for all I do in this household, like I'm asking for simple things so that maybe I have 15 minutes before I fall asleep to
I
actually.
might have used that exact sentence at one point or my wife has for sure. Yeah.
Right, because it's
Yeah.
here you're trying to shape little people where it's like you actually contribute too, and how long am I going to be shaping and saying things over and over again? So like the compassion towards like this relationship feels very one way, like can I get a ride, what's for dinner, who's coming over, and then it's like
Yeah.
wait a minute, and like the shaping takes so much endurance, stamina, and durability from parents. It's like I thought we went over this, like, but that's
Yeah.
like that long game like is just intense, right? But every time I see clients that are usually angry, it's usually something underneath it is just feeling underappreciated, or just some hurt, most
Yeah.
likely. Hmm.
Yeah. Well, great. Okay, so I want to talk to your specific work. I tried to read as much as I could, your blogs, and I went to your website and looked around a little bit. And you had a kind of a wonderful theme or phrase that you use about reframing adolescence from surviving to thriving. And I remember vividly a lot of painful memories and experiences as a teenager. Me and my dad went toe to toe a lot. I thought I had it all figured out. I was not always honest about what I was doing. And for a military guy, that was huge, right? Not being able to trust me and being a man of my word. That caused a lot of friction in the family it wasn't probably a lesson, to be honest, I've really truly figured out until I left the house and joined the military myself. So as I look back, if someone had told me at that age, hey, you can just not just survive this time at home with your dad, but you can thrive, I don't know if I would have believed that. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, maybe if you could share a specific example, either for yourself or for someone else that has made that transition and how they've made that transition. And then for the teens that are listening now, what are, I'm just trying to put myself in their shoes and try to remember what it's like to be 16 and 17. And it's ironic because I think about what I've gone through in life since then. It has been so much harder as an adult in terms of the challenges and the difficulties that you tend to face in life. And yet when you're 16 or 17, it really does feel like the whole world is collapsing. It really does feel like it's never going to get any easier, or that you don't have the tool sets and the capabilities to handle what's going on. And how do you approach that? How do you, when someone's sitting in your office, and how are you working with them to get them to change that mindset?
I definitely want to first acknowledge any relationship where we don't feel there's a high degree of negotiation. It is more difficult to thrive in. And that's, I think, some of what you mentioned about your father, and like, I feel invisible here and it's harder for me to have a voice. And for us, and the older a child or a teenager gets, the more that needs to become collaborative in a way, and the more in which they need to be working together on shared decisions. But so much what I'm seeing among this generation in particular is the most important thing I want them to learn is, even when you feel low or anxious or self-conscious, or all of the main things that adolescents feel, you can still walk through your day and walk through life. You can still take out the garbage for your parents. You can still show up to class. So when you're just surviving in an emotional state versus thriving, it's sort of like, what is this thing in my life trying to teach me right now? It's this lesson's come into my life and it's just sitting there and I just can't get rid of it. But rather than going into a victim mode, like, let me try to understand the challenge that's being presented in front of me and get a lot of support. I think people can be in a high degree of pain in life, but with community, they can pretty much do much, like most of anything. So less of us struggling is that we're all unique and different, and more universality and vulnerability around how difficult life can be for us. That to me is thriving, when you share a story with someone, you're like, I didn't realize I wasn't alone. And that's why the group format that I run is so effective in that way.
Well, that's awesome. Well, shameless plug for myself, because we have an online community, and I don't like that it's online. I wish it was in person, but we've got folks, students from kind of all over the country that are in it. I want to make it the most impactful community it can possibly be for these kids, right? And this is obviously not therapy, right? But it's coaching and it's mentoring and it's good study skills, and it's, how can you chart out a vision for your life and find an identity, and then construct great habits around that and kind of become that person that you envision for yourself. And I hope that we're able to coach them along that path. But a big part of it is community and them supporting each other and helping each other out. So, I'm not a social media fan, because I don't think that social media actually delivers community in any real way. I'm hoping that what we're doing does. So obviously you haven't seen it, you don't know, but in kind of generically, how can I make that better, right? Can we have community online? And if we can, what can we do so that we actually are supporting each other in the right ways? What I don't want to have is just sob stories, right? Where like the woe is me you talked about. We don't want to set some sort of victim status or mentality for ourselves, right? So I want people to be confident in expressing the challenges that they're having and the struggles that they're having, because other people need to see that, especially if you're successful. One of the problems, I think, with social media is all you see are successful people, or seemingly successful people. And I find that, especially for young folks, that they see that and they think, well, that person clearly has some innate talent or ability that I don't have. and what you're seeing is probably not real. But two, even if it is real, you're not seeing the years of struggle and failure that are attendant with becoming successful, right? You're not seeing any of that. It's all hidden from your view. And so, I guess back to the question is, how do we create a really good community where people are supportive, where people are not afraid to express their struggles and their failures, but at the same time, take responsibility and make meaningful steps, difficult steps to improve themselves, and get through that struggle. I know that was a lot, but
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's so much wisdom to that, and I think what I've found is nowhere else in life do we sit down other than with like children or adolescents and just have these one-sided conversations where we're not revealing how we've developed, like talk about your struggle and talk about how you're going to move through it. So I think what's important is that we model as adults or as leaders of the organization a little bit about what does that look like, attending to the pain, honoring the pain, really, really acknowledging how challenging it is and moving through it. I think people, young adults and adolescents, are looking for examples and they're looking for wisdom. And a lot of times I think in this field, it's like, well, you don't need to disclose much. You just need to ask them more questions, and it's not that conversational. And the more you kind of reveal what you've gone through or how you've gone there, I think people start to gravitate towards that. I think we also generationally need to lower the bar on, not lower the bar, that's not necessarily the right word, find ways to build upon conversation. We're in a time where a game or an activity or an icebreaker or something to get people going, people aren't as forthright to just, walk into a place and begin a conversation. And that spontaneity is lost because through a text message we can wait and send it and think it over versus just sort of think out our thoughts and put them out there.
yeah, that's really interesting about engaging in communication. I've spent my last couple of years in the service working with young folks who are trying to commission as officers, and it's very difficult for me to tell because people don't act right when you're of a higher rank, right. They don't act how they might naturally or with each other, and maybe it's also just because I bore them every day with physics, and so they're really not in a talkative mood. But maybe I'm generalizing here a little bit, but I do feel like in general, folks are a little less talkative than they used to be, or a little slower to engage in real conversation. It doesn't help that the phones are out constantly, and I hate phones. I despise my own. Tell me what you think about this. I really do think that phones shouldn't be allowed in school settings at all. They should have to stay in the dorm, and we have at our house, we're bad at it, but my wife and I really try to make an effort to keep them away from the dinner table. And there's just kind of certain sacrosanct places and areas where they should go away. And one of the things that I'm a golfer, and so there's no phone out at the golf course because you're playing golf. And it's really nice when you go and you get paired up with folks and you just have a conversation. Sometimes it's not great, but a lot of times you meet these really great people and you have these nice conversations and you make a friend for a day. And very rarely do you ever see him again. But there's there's something special in that few hours that you have together to enjoy this sport that you both love, and to make this kind of 4-hour friend and then go your separate ways. And that was a very common experience for a really long time. And I think we've kind of lost that in many ways now.
Mm-hmm. Right. Like people don't know the alternative of when you focus and are present with someone, how great that can feel to like understand them and to be understood and to share in conversation. And you don't know what you don't have until like you actually know what that feels like. And so I think so much of what we want to do even with this generation is give them these wildly contrasting experiences, from going skiing to spending a weekend doing laundry and doom scrolling, like completely different energetically. And then, well, do you see the difference here? Like, and that's how we're going to interest them in more engagement or adventure or relationship.
Yeah. Now you've been running these group sessions, or at least active in therapy for as a therapist rather for 17 years now. Have you noticed a difference in the clients or the teens, if you will, in that time in the domain of conversation, relationship, and so that my kind of the origin of that question is that the iPhone came out in 2012 and social media went on the phone just a few years after that. So kind of right now is we're getting teenagers that have grown up their whole lives with phones with social media on them. So I know that's a big question, but maybe just kind of in your space, have you seen a difference? And do you think any of that is attributed to it?
I've seen a difference, but the exciting news is that the adolescents don't want that anymore. They want
really great. Yeah, that's great news.
they really
So
want
they're distancing themselves from that now. Okay.
they're just finding it's not fulfilling, and what do I do next? There isn't like an
Okay.
easy like, oh, I could just go out and ride my bike, or I could you know, try to get people together in person. They're struggling with like, well, what else is there
Yeah.
other than this? So I'd certainly see it creating a lot of challenges. Even a really renowned couples therapist was discussing this generation is less involved in a romantic relationship too.
Yeah.
Because that takes a lot of courage to start a conversation and to pursue someone, and these skills are getting lost. That like it almost on a global level looks at like, as you know, are people going to get married anymore? Are they going to, you know, the birth rate is lower, like all these things contributing to those type of things. So my hope is like that we slowly, rather than like throw people into these type of experiences, just interest them enough as to like, that was such a more meaningful way to spend my evening after school than to go home. Now, on the flip side though, to this, we do need enough time to have that reflective capacity as people. And the minute we sit down and slow down, for those of us that are doers and go-getters, feelings come up, realizations come up, fears, sadness comes up. So we can't use doom scrolling as a way to recharge, to reflect. Like, and we all do it. We're like, oh, well, what's on the Amazon cart? Like, let's order, you know, stuff. And
Yeah.
we have to like take a walk and like, how am I feeling today? Like, what interesting things happen? Like, what's going on in my mind and heart? Like let me check in with myself. Then I'm more, now that I've checked in with myself, I have a way of checking in with someone else, because I have a pretty good idea of how awesome that feels to be more aware of where I'm at. And I'm also really curious and interested. Judgment is so on the rise for these kids. It's so challenging. You say one thing like, how was your day? And someone looks at you like, are you kidding me? I can't believe you said that. So
Wow.
all these
Okay.
things just need to be dispelled.
Yeah, there's a few things that you discussed there. I don't know if I'll remember to hit them all, but one of them is definitely the relationship between the sexes. I've followed that closely, and I've looked at the reporting and the data, and it is a little discouraging and concerning. And it's also it's hard enough, right? It's not like it was easy 20 years ago when I was a teenager, right? And so it's already challenging enough. And now you strip away some of the social tools and norms that maybe we once had. I can imagine that is an insurmountable distance to cover, at least seemingly. And you're right. We don't want to throw them. You don't want to throw them into the mix too fast. Like, you can't just set up this massive, what's the dating round robins? You know, that would probably not be a great experiment. But I wonder if, you know, because you also mentioned that it's like, well, what do I do if I'm not doom scrolling in the laundry room? What do I do? Where do I go? I wonder if just setting up, you know, I mean, I just think back to what I did, and we just hung out with each other, right? We would go to the mall. I know malls are not doing that great anymore, but, you know, I wonder if you could just set up no phone social events for short periods of time and kick the kids out the door and say, go hang out with each other, right? You know, I'd be very interested to see, one, if anybody would take you up on that, but two, I think it'd be really good. Again, maybe not like a cabin in the woods for 3 days without a phone, but for 30 minutes on Tuesdays, there's no 45 minutes, there's no phone hangout in the school gym with free snacks and food or whatever. And as lame as it might be, right?
And I think you make a really good point. But have you ever been to one of those Christmas parties or holiday party where they have the cards at the table when you sit down for dinner, and it's like these are the conversation starters among the table, and then it goes into this really rich, meaningful discussion around gratitude or whatever direction it goes. What I'm finding is it might be too big of an ask to just put people in a room and say ready, set, go. Like, what direction am I even going in? And one thing I find so fascinating, and you probably can attest to this, with little kids, there is structured ways to learn socialization, right? Here's this toy, we have this music class, there's all these offerings. And the minute you turn about 8, 9, 10, whatever, there's not as much modeling on here's how you ask so-and-so about her day. We just assume kids are going to kind of like learn this if they're seeing it at home. But I think we need a lot more guidance in their social circles to be able to know how relationship or conversation even works.
Yeah. I don't know, you might disagree with my method, but you might find the story interesting that, so in the military, we're very direct with each other, and we tend not to, tend to get right at what we're talking about. And I will say that I have had a lot of interactions. So I taught at the Naval Academy, and I'd have a lot of midshipmen. These are all aspiring officers in my various courses, and every now and then you get some weirdos, right? You get a couple of folks that are very socially awkward, and I had a habit of anytime if someone said something that was weird or strange, that I would just call it out. They'd say something awkward, and I would just say, well, that's awkward. And everybody would giggle a little bit, or, well, that's weird. And everybody would giggle a little bit. And it was never intended in a mean way. And I don't think it was taken that way. And I would usually check in with the individual afterwards to make sure. But I felt like it was really important to do because everybody felt the weirdness. And if he wasn't told, or she wasn't told how strange that comment or behavior was, then they're not going to learn. And so I don't know, maybe some might disagree with the method, but I think if you can do it in a funny and comical way, that you can still kind of guide people socially as well, right?
Completely. And humor is the biggest antidote to tension or anxiety. So maybe everyone else will like, oh my gosh, thank God. Like, somebody broke the ice here, and I think the more we convey as adults, like how to break that ice with the younger generation, they're going to get a hold of it and just let themselves run with things more. Yeah,
absolutely. So you do group sessions with teens and parents, or just teens? How does that work exactly?
I have a parenting group every Friday morning at 10 a.m. Or 11 a.m. 11 a.m. Pacific Standard. And that's a free group for parents to join to talk about their journey in parenting their adolescent, as well as their own internal journey and their internal triggers. So much of parenting an adolescent well is even if the behavior doesn't change, how are you going to maintain your own sanity and your own wellness despite the outcome of them and their growth trajectory might not meet the exact timing you want. So parents, I think, need a lot of support and encouragement around how to navigate that. So that's a parent offering that I have currently going, and it's really nice as a way to give back to the community. And then I have 2 different interpersonal process groups for adolescents that meet in person, and I'm going to be launching one in the fall that will be online as well too for adolescents.
Oh, great!
That format, yeah.
Oh, very nice. Okay, very good. So first of all, we would love to have you as a special guest in our community. We do special guests once a month, so we'd love to have you there to do like a Q&A with our members. And I'm more than happy to give them that information about your online group as well, if anybody's interested in that. But maybe for the general audience, what things are you seeing recently with teens that might be just a quick piece of pocket advice for again the kids that are listening now, wondering what are they what common struggles are you seeing, what methods are useful to work through kind of those different struggles or anxieties, And just any general advice you might have for the listeners out there who have a real full-fledged psychologist that they're listening to going,
Oh,
what do I
okay.
do? How do I fix my life, Brittany?
That's a great question. I think just the simple thing is take a risk, and if it doesn't work, like pivot off of that. If you sign up for a group offering, or if you go out into the community and you consider, I want to do jujitsu or martial arts, and you walk in the studio and you put your shoes on and you get going, you gotta just I think sometimes in life, like, choose a direction and just start by
Yeah.
starting, go in limping, go in just like, I don't even care, I don't even know why I'm here. Like, some kids come, they just eat the food, all of a sudden they're like, what, did someone just say something that was meaningful, like I actually want to add to this conversation. So I think in life, many of us, adults and kids, wait till we have so many answers to try something and to go for it. So that would be my biggest suggestion. And as they go for it, having a huge lens of compassion if it feels too out of their comfort zone,
Yeah.
and just to get curious, like, why didn't I want to continue with that? But um, that's what comes to mind.
So, one of the things that we do is coaching and mentoring, and in fact, so that's the podcast. It's Teach, Coach, Mentor, right? And so, I wanted to ask you about the difference between coaching and mentoring and actual therapy. Now, obviously, there's a difference, but in actually trying to articulate the difference before you came on, I didn't have a super clear distinction between them in my mind, with the exception that obviously the problems that you might go to a therapist for are more complex and more difficult, and they require a set of tools and knowledge that a therapist has that a regular person coach wouldn't have. But
Uh-huh.
I think maybe I suspect that there's maybe even a more fundamental difference than that. And so I just wanted your thoughts on it, and also want to dispel, or at least maybe address, this funny paradox, which is to say, if someone has a coach or a mentor that's really great, they're very happy to talk about that. I have this great coach. I have this wonderful mentor. I mean, you started with well, he was a therapist, but somebody that really helped me and changed me. But there is a stigma on the other side to say, well, I have this great therapist. And as soon as someone says that, there's a weirdness about it. There seems to be more of a social stigma around therapy. And I know it, but I don't understand it, right? What is the difference between me getting business advice or career advice or family advice from a coach or a mentor, and me going to a licensed professional to help me work through through a different set of problems? So
Sure. I think coaching and mentoring is a lot more strategy based and action plan and planning and planning in general. And then I think that psychotherapy is going to be really delving into the depths of your soul, your childhood. A lot more training is needed to be involved in going to those places with people, because a lot can get activated. And if it's not done well, it could send someone feeling worse after. So those are my initial thoughts on that.
yeah, I, it's an easy analogy to make, but it's just so much different in real life. If someone's not meeting some standard academically, physically, and you say, hey, you're not meeting this is the minimum standard. You're here. Let's get you to where you need to be. People don't seem to have a problem with that. It's not that it's comfortable necessarily to be told that you're not hitting it, but that's reasonably straightforward. But if you're struggling emotionally or struggling mentally, I don't understand why we can't treat that in a very similar way, to say, well, look, you're not, something is going on emotionally or mentally or spiritually that you're struggling with. Like, let's identify that and let's get it fixed. But that does seem to be very, very different kind of thing. It's treated very differently. It's not talked about as much. Do you have any
I
intuition as to why that is?
Yeah, I think therapy can actually be really direct if you're dealing with someone who has a lot of candor and is pretty fierce in that way to take those risks once they know the relationship is established with their client. A lot of my colleagues have been talking about this. Like, stop tiptoeing around, like, giving people frank advice on the fact that they're about ready to blow up their marriage or about ready to drop out of college. Like, let's go in there with them. So definitely that's just more temperament and personality of the coach or the clinician. Um, I'm losing my thought. I think on that, yeah.
Well, yeah, just the difference between, I guess, the stigma associated with going to therapy as opposed to a coach or something.
Um, well, the stigma, I guess, would come maybe from to I'm wondering, do you work with quite a bit more men than women?
Yeah, yes, I do.
And so there's been such a shift towards men evolving, and kudos to men right now, like in terms of how much they're evolving emotionally to understand how to show up in their relationships. But the old school mentality of just rub some dirt in it and just you'll be fine does not create a long-term sustainable marriage, does not create like a long-term health and wellness for that man walking through life, on a like a physical standpoint, all of the components of how that's going to break down because they're not dealing with their emotional life. So I would say that would be maybe some of the reason why people just feel like they have to be too tough to go there. Yeah.
Why do you think, well, maybe why do men do that? I do that, right? I when you say rub some dirt in it and get over it, like I connect with that, right? Um, and I don't know, maybe I should work with you, but I don't think I have emotional problems. And I my wife and I talk, and we've been through marriage counseling and therapy before a couple of times. I think every marriage should do it, even if things are going great. It's really wonderful to have a third person to talk to. There's something totally different about having a tough conversation with your spouse next to you or your significant other next to you, but you're not talking to them. You're talking to the therapist. That somehow that's freeing and less triggering. I can't explain why.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I don't, right? It is. Like I
To be with
remember.
someone to finally moderate the way in which you gridlock together. Because
Yeah.
when you gridlock together, the activation of gridlocking with anyone, a roommate, a colleague, will send you back into that 2-year old place where you're like, this person is triggering me so much. So you have someone
Yeah.
holding the space rather than just walking into the kitchen and trying to have the conversation and then it just goes in completely south, right? You have like a designated time and space. It's so hard for us in our relationships to see that there's such a need for that.
Yeah. So for any young folks who are, getting married early, although that doesn't happen as often as it used to, but if there are, but my recommendation is don't be afraid to go get a therapist. Some sort of marriage counseling. Even think about it as preventative medicine, right? That even if things are going fine, there's something going on that might build up. You're laying the structure for maybe triggers down the road, and I don't know if you would agree with that advice, but
Well, I think a lot of times we're looking to milestones for adolescents, like such as getting into college and winning on their sports team, but we're not looking at the long-term factors that make for a good life. And I
yeah,
think you and I would both agree, like your health, your family, like um, your spiritual connection, your sense of adventure and balance. Um, we're not teaching adolescents like how to already develop some of the largest factors towards nobody, like, right before they pass away says, I wish I would have worked another day. Nobody
right.
says that. I wish I would have like had a better relationship. And so there's got to be more conversations and less parenting from the standpoint of like, well, we're going to Brown and we got into SC and like that's
Yeah,
great, but that is just the first steps towards your kid's success. And I would guarantee that your kid 20 years from then will say, even though I have this crushing career, because my marriage or my family is so disjointed, I'm not happy. This isn't
yeah.
making me happy.
It's really interesting in a bad way to me how we spend virtually zero time, kind of as a society, coaching folks on how to be husbands and wives, how to be parents. Right? We spend zero time on it. Right? When I got married, I don't. My uncle officiated it, and he's a minister, and we had one conversation for 30 minutes, beforehand, and I think that was it. Right? So no one taught me, hey, this is what's expected of you as a husband. As far as I know, no one taught my wife. I assume modeled or emulated our parents, that I tried to be the way that my dad was, and that maybe she tried to be like the way that her mom was. I'm not even sure, right? And it probably caused a lot more friction than would have otherwise been necessary. Another thing that was terrifying was bringing home our daughter for the first time. I had no idea how to be a dad, right? Other than seeing my dad and maybe modeling his parenting,
Yeah.
and that's very frustrating to me. Now, looking back on it in hindsight, that we don't spend enough time chatting about maybe outside of and maybe inside. I know a lot of religious communities that those conversations happen more often, but maybe there's some way we
Yeah.
can inject that a little bit more often into our discourse.
Cool. Awesome. This is such a great conversation, and hopefully we can pick back up another time too.
Yeah, for sure. I would like to dive into that at some point. So I wanted to. I know we got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but and I don't know how many people we have in Orange County, but if we have folks in Orange County, I'll put it all in the show notes. But tell them where they can find you and how they can get a hold of you if they're interested in your group sessions or one-on-one
Sure,
sessions with
sure.
you.
So I see people worldwide. I also am able to provide coaching, not
Perfect.
just psychotherapy. So they don't necessarily have to be in Orange County, but for those families that really want in-person services, the best way is to just go ahead to log on my website, brittanyfalla.com, and I will get back to you from that point of contact.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed just kind of keeping my company just solo so that I can continue to refine and finesse like my own clinical style and spend a lot of time in training with some really seasoned mentors that I haven't really. You don't have to see someone else if you want to work with me. I've kept it that way, so
Wonderful.
that would be a joy to meet more people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today, Brittany. We've really enjoyed
Thank
having you
you.
here.
Cool. Thanks.